Texas Southern versus Jackson State showed me two things. One, JSU knows how to bounce back. And two, TSU ain't on that level yet. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one. Daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Morgan State's offense. They're holding the team back, and quite frankly, I don't think that they will ascend this year. I'm just going to put it plainly like that, and we'll elaborate in segment 3. In segment 2, we'll take a look at TSU. This game showed me they ain't on that level yet. They are not on that level yet, so we'll look towards it. But I want to start off with Jackson State because Jackson State, for most people, is probably the story of the game. Jackson State, for most people, is probably the ones that you want to talk about because they had a real bounce back performance. The reason I say for most people is because on this show, how we looked at it was TSU has something to prove. That'll be segment 2. I'm not avoiding that. But I do think that Jackson State's statement in this game it's the louder thing. It's the more important thing to discuss because clearly one of these teams is amongst the elites and one is not. I think that Jackson State's turnovers really shifted how we viewed their performance last week because at the end of the day, that's the reason they lost by the amount that they lost by. At the end of the day, that is the reason that they lost by that amount. Jackson State is not a bad football team. Jackson State is a good football team. I think maybe some people started to doubt that a little bit. I think some people maybe started to look at the loss to Grambling, the amount of turnovers that they had against Grambling and said, oh, Jackson State's not the best out. You have to remember where they were. Coming into that game, they were the number one team in the rankings that we go over every single week. And this is early in the season where one loss can shift you so much. It dropped them from number 1 to out of the top 5. Did I think that that was warranted? No, I didn't. I actually thought that they should have been 5. I think that they should have been 5, but instead they were 7. Yeah, they were. Hampton was 5, Tennessee State was 6, and Jackson State was 7. Yeah. So, hey, TC Taylor said it after the game. We heard all the noise, which means there was people talking, which isn't surprising. Jackson State losing that game to Grambling. I didn't hear the noise, but it's not surprising that the noise would be there. But they clearly felt like they needed a bounce back. And though the turnovers kind of, I feel like shift is the word of the episode. I'll say altered this time. Distorted. That's the probably good one. I would say that the turnovers distorted how we felt about Jackson State last week. But I'll tell you what, I watched it. I didn't think they were bad. They had a critical issue, but I didn't think that they were bad. But then I look at the numbers in preparation for my Texas Southern versus Jackson State game. And I was like, oh, the offense did a lot. The offense was really racking up some yardage. I didn't realize their ability to get explosive plays. I didn't realize all of this. You start seeing those things. You know, I wrote an article today with Saints Wire, and we were talking about the Saints defense. This was yesterday. And we were talking about the team as a whole, but specifically the inability to close games. And in there, I had a line in which I said, sometimes the eye test and statistics match up. I don't think that was the case for Jackson State. You have to look at I would say trust your heart, trust your eyes, but it's never too bad to double check yourself. And in looking up in hearing that conversation and leading to me looking up what kind of yardage that JSU was putting up against Grambling, I remembered, oh, the offense did show a lot of good. They did that here, but then also protected the football. So now it's like, oh, this offense looks stellar because they're protecting the football. They clearly have the weaponry. They clearly have the talent, the offensive line. They clearly have everything that they need to move down the field. But those turnovers can kill you. They're the great equalizer in football. You turn the ball over, it doesn't matter how many yards you get. You get those turnovers, don't matter how many yards you give up. That's how it works. But the one problem I did have with Jackson State was the quarterback play. I thought Cam McCoy and Jacoby Morgan were bad against Grambling. I was not satisfied. Well, Jacoby Morgan started this game. He finished this game, and he finished off TSU. He was an absolute monster. He had 185 touchdowns, 2 through the air, or not 185 touchdowns would be crazy. He had 185 yards with 2 touchdowns through the air. He had 96 yards with 2 touchdowns on the ground. I support starting Jacoby Morgan. TC Taylor said, hey, if he performs like he performed in practice this week, he's going to hold on to that job moving forward. Because he said he was working hard. And you see it on the field. You saw it. That's nearly 300 yards total and 4 touchdowns in the game. That Jacoby Morgan was absolutely phenomenal. But also Cam McCoy has done this 2 or 3 times in which he started the game and didn't finish it. You have to have questions about his durability. And I don't want to go into every game with a guy I don't know if he's going to finish it. He hasn't finished the game yet. Cam McCoy has not finished a single game in 2024. So, yeah, I lean towards Jacoby Morgan because of health. If nothing else, because of health. But listen, I didn't come on here doing a whole bunch of pumping my chest out and all of that other good stuff. So I don't really feel bad about it, but we are going to get into it in segment 2. I also want to say that Travis Terrell looks like he's going to be a star one day. He's had double-digit touches once, and that was the first game of the year. Irv Mulligan wasn't there. J.D. Martin wasn't there. This guy is young. I heard TC talking about him, about all of the weight that they're putting on him and how he can handle more than a typical freshman. This feels like a player who's going to be special. This feels like a player who is going to, in the long run, make a lot of noise in the SWAC, potentially get an Offensive Player of the Year in the SWAC. He had a return touchdown this week. He had a rushing touchdown the week prior. You feel like something special when you're watching him. You feel like you're seeing that because he's dynamite. You understand that any moment he can take it for a touchdown. Doesn't matter if he's at his own 5 or your 5. You just trust him a lot. And that's a very unique thing to say about a freshman. So Terrell, he doesn't get a lot of touches. I think as run, and you have 2 quarterbacks who are going to run the ball too. That's another thing you have to factor in. Morgan, McCoy, they're going to run the ball. And while they run the ball, that's going to take away some rushes from your running backs. And Terrell's already a part of a rotation. I didn't even mention a guy like Ahmad Miller. So you're going to have a lot of guys, but Travis Terrell is one of those ones. He's somebody that you have to watch. And in watching Jackson State, they heard all of the noise from Grambling. They heard maybe you doubting about who they really are. It wasn't me, so I can say this. They may have heard you doubting about who they really are. And they said, oh, in case you forgot, this is what I can do. Let's drop 43 on their head, hold them to 14, absolutely dominate this game, and show that they are not on our level. I don't know if people thought they were, but they're not. So take that. But let's look at that statement, because TSU showed clearly they are not ready to prove it, and they are not ready to be on that level. So let's look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Roy. And Roy is a great platform. It's a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. So download Roy on iOS or Android and enter the referral code Locked On. There's a space between locked and on. So locked space on. And you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to earn $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. But this week, we selected Gennaro Scott out of Miles College for our Roy Player of the Week. The reason I did that is because I was able to watch him in person, and I think that he's a great example. We have so many conversations about how NILs and how bigger schools will come down and they'll grab your players. Well, at a D2 HBCU, he could get grabbed up by an FCS one. So maybe you want to keep him at Miles College. You want to make sure that he's feeling good. Go ahead and throw him some dollars in there for the lunch. Go ahead and throw him some dollars in there for the NIL and make your move. So all you have to do is download Roy on the iOS or Android, or for your iOS or Android, and get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen of the day, check out Locked On. What we want to do today? Let's check out Locked On Tar Heels. Well, Isaac Shade, friend of the show. So check that out. That's good work right there. We've looked at the Jackson State side of this. Now let's look at the TSU side, the Texas Southern side, and I previewed this game as TSU's opportunity to prove that they're one of those teams, to prove that they're a real contender, because I think that Jackson State is a real contender. Nothing was going to shake me in that. So a TSU win just would have showed me that TSU was for real. But this TSU loss showed me that TSU is not for real. I didn't come out here and beat my chest and say TSU is this, that, and the third. So I don't think that I earn any slack from it, or any flack, I should say. I don't think that I've earned that. But what I will say is I was completely wrong about the way this game will go down. I think Jackson State was the favorite. I always thought Jackson State was the favorite. I never came in and tried to talk with a level of bravado that made you think I thought TSU was going to win this game. I stayed away from a prediction, and I had no confidence that I would have been right in saying that TSU was going to be the victor. But I will say I thought it was a toss-up, and one that wouldn't have surprised me. The reason that I am completely wrong is that I said whoever wins this game would win a close one. This game wouldn't be close if you flipped. This game wouldn't be close if you flipped Jackson State's score from 43 to 34. They were dominant, man. Like, let's just be real about it. They looked like Texas Southern had no business on the field with them. An absolute dominating performance that if they're able to replicate it again and again and again, this is going to be a game, or this is going to be a team that you're really looking out for. Jackson State, and I hate to look forward, but Jackson State has FAMU on October 19th. They both play one game before that. You have Alabama State versus FAMU this week. And you have Jackson State versus Alabama A&M. If they can get through if they can get through them, they get to face each other on October 19th, because they both have bye weeks the week before. I will be through the roof if these two teams face each other with undefeated SWAC records. Anyway, back to TSU. And I'm not going to give PV the satisfaction. I wasn't going to give PV the satisfaction of giving this little speech on the day that they had their episode. But the truth of the matter is that TSU knocked off PV to open up the season, and they haven't won since. And the fact that or how they lost, I would rather say. Because you could have lost this game and still showed me something, but you didn't show me anything. TSU losing this game the way that they did, to me, really drives home that PV is the only team that you've beat this season. It was a month ago. You've lost to Rice, expected. You lost to Lamar. Okay, fine. I was bringing up different reasons to excuse it. But when you lose to Jackson State, the first SWAC opponent that you've played since PV, in the way that you did, in the manner that you did, it sullies everything. It does. It really makes you wonder if TSU is that good, or if TSU is just a team that was a benefactor of a weak PV start. I think that they have a lot more to prove now. TSU has to prove that they can be competitive, and they have a tough schedule coming up. I still think the SWAC West is tough. I still think that the SWAC West, you could see them come out on top. But Grambling has the easiest schedule, and we'll talk about that in some capacity tomorrow, I think. If not, we'll talk about it we'll probably talk about it on Thursday. I think I know what we're going to do tomorrow, and it's going to be a little bit too much. But yeah, just in general, right? They got dominated. They didn't look like they belonged on the field when Jackson State was on defense. I just told you about what Jacoby Morgan did. 4 touchdowns. Didn't look like they belonged there. Or Mulligan had a really good game, probably the best game since returning. Um, they had a field goal or a punt blocked. You had a safety. I think that was the same play, actually. But then you had a kickoff return for a touchdown. TSU got utterly dominated in every single aspect of this game. They didn't look like contenders. They looked like a team, right? So, we say when you play bad teams, you're supposed to dominate. That's what this game felt like, except TSU was the bad team that was supposed to be dominated. I didn't feel that way about them going in. I'm looking at them with a little bit more skepticism. I think that Jackson State is probably one of the 2 to 3 best teams, probably 2, in my opinion, one of the 2 best teams in this conference. It's not shame in losing to them. It's shame in losing the way that you did. And that right there is my problem. Now, as we push forward, I'm not going to harp on that too much. It is what it is. Also, they shut down Texas Southern's running game. It was all bad. Okay? It was all bad. TSU ain't belong out there, man. It was not close. It was 27-0 at a certain point. TSU started scoring in the fourth quarter. Sheesh. But I got to call it fair. Now, as we push forward, you want to talk about bad offense. Morgan State. Their offense is so poor, I have no hope that they can ascend. Matter of fact, I'm ready to declare that they won't. As we continue, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, when it comes to FanDuel, the NFL season, I don't know what the point over under was for Detroit versus Seattle, but I'm looking at it right now and it's 42-27. I'm pretty sure that was more than what was expected, and I think that Seattle may come down and score some points in a little bit. Oh, they just called a safety. So now it's 42-29. And I think that Seattle's about to go down and score points. I can guarantee if you pick the over, you got it. So this one is fun. This is a good game. But you can make the same amount of money, have the same type of fun on NHL, on MLB, on WNBA, on NBA. Sports are fun. Making money on sports is more fun. So now it's on you. Go to FanDuel.com just go to FanDuel.com. And then when you look at it, if you put down a $5 bet, you get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed immediately. No questions asked. So go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we continue rolling and wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Morgan State is not ascending into that upper level of the MEAC this year. The offense is simply too poor, and I'm going to try to be concise about this. I'm going to attempt to not belabor the point and be repetitive because I understand that I have a tendency to. And on topics like this, I don't want to seem like I'm bagging on Morgan because I actually think that they're a solid team. But the problem is we wanted them to go from a solid team to a great team. And that's not going to be possible unless your offense gets it together. And I don't think that their offense is going to get it together. Nothing that they've shown me shows that they would get it together, right? And people always say it'll get better when conference play starts. I have 2 schools of thought on that. One, the best teams show you something in the non-conference games. The best teams show you reason to believe in non-conference games. That's what they do. I don't know when the last time that a team just looked absolutely horrendous in non-conference and came in and dominated or looked really good in conference play. That just typically is not the case. You have to show us something. It's like North Carolina Central goes against these FCS out-of-conference opponents, right? They go against guys or teams that you think are going to be top 25 entering the season. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. You go against CAA teams. You do all of this. And you see them show premise or promise. You see them do that. So then when we get into conference play, you expect something from them. I'm not saying that you look super deep into these games, but they do set an expectation. And Morgan State has set an expectation that their offense is not going to be good. The other school of thought on this is the fact that, you know, things do turn up. Things do get better most times when you get into conference play. I won't deny it, but it's also a certain level, right? Like, I'm not going to go from being one of the worst offenses in the country to being one of the best offenses in the conference. It's not happening. If I'm playing at a 4, I'm not all of a sudden going to take it up to a 10 because I'm playing conference play. I may go from a 4 to a 6.5. Like, so yeah, things turn up, but where'd you start from? Because where'd you start from is your baseline. Where you started from is your baseline on where you're going to be when it's all said and done. Excuse me. So that's my two ways of thought. You got to show us something, and they haven't. Right? Like in Meet the Grams, Kendrick said, "Why believe you never gave us any? You never gave us nothing to believe in." Right? That was the premise. Why believe you? You never gave us nothing to believe in. That's how I feel about the Morgan State offense. Why believe that they're going to turn it up when conference play starts? And how much can they turn it up? Because they haven't given us anything to believe in. They've scored 30 points against Hampton. Where's the heartbeat since? That was the first game of the season. Ironically, it's the time when their defense gave it the most points, and they had to do it. But what about the rest of the out of conference? 9 points, 6 points, 3 points. What you do against Virginia Lynchburg is not going to turn me up. I will ignore everything you do against Virginia Lynchburg. Them 57 points mean diddly squat to me. Those 57 points. I'm sorry. Everybody walks Virginia Lynchburg. I think TSU plays them for homecoming this week. Let me see. If so, I'm gonna retract my statement because I believe in jinxes. Let's see who TSU plays for homecoming. But who really cares? Yeah, they play Virginia Lynchburg. Everybody does not dog walk Virginia Lynchburg. They're a very tough team. You know, have talented players. But like seriously though, let's be real. 57 points against Virginia Lynchburg. Does it mean something? Yeah, because I guess I never would have thought that Morgan State's offense could do that. So there's something in there. But they're rolling with the same quarterbacks as last year. I'm seeing Deuce Taylor out there. Like I'm seeing guys from last year where it didn't work. What makes me think it's going to work this time? It hasn't worked. You scored 30 points versus Hampton. Then you went in the game and scored 9, scored 6, scored 3. And it's aggravating because you're wasting a defense. Elijah Williams is out the door next year. You are wasting a defense. That's the frustrating part. So yes, conference play is going to start soon. Do I expect them to be held to single digits? No. But it's like I said, what you do in out of conference, it sets the bar. It sets the baseline. You'll turn up, but you're not going to turn the volume to the max probably unless you're close to the max. You're going to turn it up a little bit. So now what, you go from single digits to teens? That's just not enough for me. And it's not to say that the defense is infallible. I don't believe that. I don't believe that they're infallible. They got ran up and down by Roland Dempster in Stony Brook last week. And his running mate Martin. So this isn't to say that. But what I was looking for out of Morgan State is for them to ascend and be a top team. What I believe is they're exactly who they were last year. They're a solid squad who will push a lot of people, but they're not championship material. Because in order to be that, you have to have a certain level of quarterback play, in my opinion. And it's a certain level that they do not have. So that's my take on them. So that's how I feel. Morgan State's offense is holding them back. They will not be ascending. We've talked about it. That put them in that tier. South Carolina State, they just put a plate on North Carolina A&T. Do I think A&T has a good defense? No. I don't think that A&T has shown themselves to be a good team. But at the same time, do I think that Morgan State puts up 44 points? Nah, I don't. I really don't. They have given us nothing to believe in. And I'm not about to walk into the season, walk into conference play with blind faith. So we'll be back tomorrow to look at the power rankings. We'll be back tomorrow to look at the Walker Harris Invitational, aka the Circle City Classic with North Carolina Central. We're going to get into that. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. In the meantime, between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.